very much, Claire, for that introduction. And thanks to everybody for coming. I've had a great time already today, and I hope that the rest of this festival we are really going to get some discussion about how the left goes forward and how we try to unite and how we do all the things that we want to do and how we face up to all of the challenges, which I think we all know are such great challenges for us in Britain and in the world today. I wanted to start with the war because, as partly the title of the meeting, but partly because it's something which is very much on my mind all the time, and I feel it's something that too many people in this country who should really know better ignore as a major part of what the politics of our government are all about. And I want to start with a man called Robert Bales. I don't know if you've read about him recently in the papers. Probably not, because it hasn't been front page of the tabloids or The Guardian or any of these places, and it hasn't been reported very much. Robert Bales is a man who pleaded guilty this week to the murder of 16 Afghan women and children. He left his base in Afghanistan. He's an American soldier. He's now under arrest in Seattle. He left his base in Afghanistan last year. He went out into a village near where he was based. He kicked down the doors of a number of houses in exactly the way that soldiers do in Afghanistan when they're raiding people's houses, and he shot and killed a whole number of people, most of them women and children. And he came back to the base covered in blood, as you would be after that kind of experience. He was arrested, but immediately taken out of the country, even though the Afghans demanded the right to be able to put him on trial for the murder of so many of their nationals. And it does strike me that in most circumstances in Britain, a mass murder of 16 people would be headline news across all the papers. We might even be getting psychological profiles as to why he did this. And certainly, I think you have to compare the coverage of these kind of atrocities in Afghanistan, both with the extensive reporting, and quite rightly in some ways, the extensive reporting of individual murders which take place in this country and elsewhere, but perhaps also, because we've lived through this in the last couple of weeks, perhaps also compare it to the extensive reporting of the terrible murder of the soldier in Woolwich, Lee Rigby, just, less than 2 weeks ago. Because there we saw terrible pictures of people with blood on their hands, we saw terrible things that had happened. But it seems to me we take a very different attitude when we're talking about something like that, the death of a soldier in Britain, compared to the deaths of many civilians in Afghanistan. And I was struck by this because as soon as Lee Rigby was murdered, we saw the film, millions of us saw the film, where the people who committed this terrible act said, we're doing this because of the wars in Afghanistan and elsewhere. We're sorry that women and children have to see it, but this is how women and children see things in Afghanistan, in Somalia, in Yemen, in all these kind of countries. And your government doesn't care about you. Your government will let you people be killed while they'll keep themselves safe. Now, the instant reaction of David Cameron, of Boris Johnson, the Mayor of London, was to say, this has nothing to do with government foreign policy. Now, what does it really take when you have people who've just committed an act saying, on camera, it does have to do with foreign policy? What kind of dishonesty and lies are we putting up from our government who say that this has absolutely no connection? And I think this whole idea, you can't mention the war in terms of explaining the increase in terrorism that we've seen over the last 12 years, that you can't explain what impact it has on people around the world when they see and hear about these terrible things that have happened to people, where they know that we don't count the number of dead in Afghanistan or Iraq or anywhere else. It seems to me that what we are doing then is perpetrating a lie put by our government that we should not have anything to do. And we should say very clearly, that these acts are connected with foreign policy. They are connected with wars, and these are wars which our government and the American government are addicted to. Only this week, William Hague was responsible for lifting the EU arms embargo so that he can supply weapons to what is already a deadly civil war in Syria. These people are criminally irresponsible. They've done it in Afghanistan, they've done it in Iraq, they've done it in Libya, and now they are trying to do it across the whole of the Middle East. So it seems to me that what we have to talk about tonight is firstly opposition to war and a determination to hold our government to account for a foreign policy which has been an absolute disaster from beginning to end. And what it has done is not just create misery for people in those countries, it has also created misery for people in this country. The attacks on civil liberties, we've had a man here today, there was a meeting earlier, Hamza Hassan, whose brother Tallah is in prison in the United States, deported along with Babar Ahmed. The attacks on civil liberties are now things which again are leading people towards greater acts of terrorism. The actual way in which Muslims are being demonised is creating Islamophobia on a scale that we have never seen it in this country. And what you find is that all the time Muslims are being told they have to apologise. They have to apologise for an act of terror that they had absolutely nothing to do with. They have to apologise for dressing in a certain way, or worshipping at a mosque, or doing any of those things. And it seems to me we never ask this question. Is there something about American society or British society that leads its soldiers to behave in this kind of way? Is there a psychological sense in which people might regard Afghan women as somehow inferior to women in the West? We never ask these questions because the assumption is that what we do, what Britain does, what the United States does, must be right, and that somehow we're a civilising mission in Afghanistan, in Syria and everywhere else. And this is a complete fallacy of the greatest sort, and it's something that we really have to reject. And it's something which has become very, very dangerous, because now, since the attack in Woolwich, we've had the rise of Islamophobia, the EDL back out on the streets again. We've had all of these things going on. UKIP, which did well in the elections last month, did so largely on the basis of being against Europe and of being against immigration, and therefore we've had a rise in attacks on immigrants, attacks on Muslims, attacks on mosques. All of these things are going on. And it's the same people who have brought us these wars year after year that are now also demanding that we accept austerity. Now, when you look at what they are saying we have to do, the poorest people in this country are having their benefits cut. If you are a single woman parent, you cannot get more than £500 a week benefits, and therefore you have to choose between whether you feed yourself or you feed your children. You're being told that if you have one spare bedroom, this is somehow a luxury in one of the richest countries in the world. You are told that if you are sick or disabled, you have to keep reporting for work until you are found to be healthy enough to do it. These are the barbarisms that we are now being faced with this austerity. And the austerity is not about cutting the deficit, because it's failed in those terms. Actually, the deficit has risen despite this. It's not about this. It's about transforming the welfare state, transforming social services, transforming the NHS, transforming everything that people have stood for and have fought for in the last 60 or 70 years. And therefore, the same people who want to do it, the same people who brought us war, are also bringing us austerity. And I don't know how other people feel here, but I am personally absolutely fed up with people saying, if you don't like your benefits being cut, blame it on the person down the road who's getting more. I'm fed up with people saying, if you can't get a house, blame it on the person with a different coloured skin who's got a house just down the road. I'm fed up with people saying that the problem is immigrants, or the problem is Muslims, or the problem is black people, or any of these things, when what we are facing, the reason so much money is paid in benefits in this country, there's two very simple reasons. The majority of people who get benefits are what called the working poor. In other words, their wages are so low that they have to have benefits to supplement their wages. The housing benefit, billions of pounds, is going to greedy landlords who put up the rent month after month and know that they're going to get the money from the state in order to pay it. So what we're doing with benefits is not giving it to the poorest people, we're giving it to greedy landlords and we're giving it to employers who should be paying a living wage. That's the truth of the matter. And if we change this, and if we say, we are demanding a living wage, we are demanding a decent house for everybody to live in at a fair rent or a fair mortgage to be able to pay, then we would already have a much, much better society. But of course, that is a dangerous idea. You know, when you have the worst housing crisis in London since the Second World War, we're told the one thing we can't do is have rent controls. Why not? It would be the most sensible thing that you cap the rent that people have to pay. But that isn't allowed. You're not allowed to interfere with the employers who are paying low wages. That's not allowed. You're not allowed to interfere with the big corporations who pay virtually no tax in this country. Every working person in this country has to pay tax and has to pay a large proportion of their income in tax, whereas the companies and the richest people in this country pay virtually no tax. And if we began to reverse that, we would have the money to spend on welfare, on education, on health, on housing, on all the things that people really need. Now, we're told that we're all in it together, that we all have to make sacrifices. This is at a time when 23 members of the cabinet are millionaires, where the rich are getting richer in this country, where the property market at 2 million plus in London is booming, where they have no problem in selling houses that cost over more than £2 million a house. All of those things are happening. They say we're all in it together. The people who are all in it together are the people who are trying to screw us. Whether it's the people who commit the wars, whether it's the people who are forcing us into austerity, whether it's the people who scapegoat against the poorest people in this society in order to whip up racism in order to divide and rule us. These are the people that are all in it together, and we have to get all in it together against them. And I think the most dangerous idea that we should discuss this weekend, and the one that they fear the most, and many things that they fear that I hope we'll be discussing over the next day or so, but the idea that they fear most is the most dangerous idea for them is that we could run this society better than they could. That's what they really hate, is the idea that ordinary working people could begin to change society and run it in a different way. And that is the dangerous idea, which personally I think we should be hearing a lot more of, because could we do a better job than David Cameron, George Osborne, all of these people? Well, we'd be very hard pressed to do a worse job. That is what this weekend is about. So thank you very much. I hope we'll all be more dangerous at the end of it.